Ciao, I'm Mary Ann Esposito.
And I'm Calliope.
Today on Ciao Italia, tanti biscotti. You know, I think today we should make some tanti biscotti. Do you know what that means?
No.
A lot of cookies, yes. Biscotti is the word for cookie in Italian. And we're going to explain what biscotti means because there's a little trick to making these cookies. But first we have to start with making the dough. And today we're going to make a dough that has a lot of different variations. So you can call it tanti biscotti. So the first thing is to measure the flour correctly. So if you don't have a scale, which is the way the Italians would do it, then you're starting with a dry measure, not a liquid measure, a dry measure. So glass is not usable here. You want to use either a metal container or you want to use plastic. So then you take the flour from your flour bag, see? And you just lightly sprinkle it in a cup.
So you can't just like scoop it up?
No, because you would get too much. And then you sweep. Then you know you have a cup of flour. So we have about 3 1/4 cups of flour in this bowl already pre-measured. But before we work with that, we've got to cream some butter and some sugar. So here we have 5 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Why don't you put that in there? 5 tablespoons softened. And we have 1 1/4 cups of sugar. So we'll put that in. So what creaming means, Calliope, is that we have to get this butter and sugar so well combined that you're not going to feel any grit in the bottom of the bowl. So the butter and sugar is really going to be really well combined. And the color will change. It will become lighter in color. So that takes a few minutes to do. So you want to start with softened butter because that'll make the process go even further. So let's explain what we're doing with the tanti biscotti. First of all, this is, you want to tell them who you are?
I'm Calliope Bodkin.
And Calliope is the granddaughter of Paul Lally, who produces this show. He's behind the camera. So we're going to show her how to make cookies today. So what you have to do when you are using a mixer like this is every once in a while you have to lift the mixer and you have to push down the ingredients because they like to hang around the sides of the bowl, see? So you want to make sure that you're getting that all well creamed. So while that's creaming, let's talk about the other ingredients that we're going to have. So with the flour, we want some baking powder. So there's 3 1/4 teaspoons. You can put that in there. 3 1/4 teaspoons, and then you have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Do you want to put that in? Okay. Put the salt in. Mix that all around.
Do we use baking soda too?
No, we don't use baking soda. You want to use baking soda when you're doing something that has an acid in it. So like if you were making cookies that had buttermilk, you would have to use baking soda. All right, so now I'm going to close this once more, lift it up, and move that butter back down into that sugar.
Butter, sugar.
Butter and sugar, yeah.
Yum, yum.
And get that going. Now, I should tell you that if you travel in Italy, biscotti, believe it or not, are what Italians eat for breakfast. One year I had an Italian boy visiting us from northern Italy. And I had all the cereal ready on the table, was going to do eggs and bacon, give him a real American breakfast. And he said to me, "Avete I biscotti? Do you have cookies?" And then I realized, you know, that's what he's used to. So I said, no, you're going to have to eat what Americans eat. Okay. So now we're going to add our eggs. So we have 4 large eggs, and to that we're going to add some vanilla, real vanilla. So vanilla extract has 35% alcohol. You want to make sure you're buying the real thing by looking on the bottle and seeing that it says extract, not flavoring. Flavoring is something entirely different. So I'm going to just beat those up a little bit.
Does it matter if you like put in only 1 egg at a time?
You can put in 1 egg at a time. That's even better because it will blend. But we have so many cookies to do that I'm Kind of rushing the process today.
Fine.
So now I'm going to add the egg mixture. And wipe the bowl down on the sides again, because that's really important. What kind of cookies do you like to make at home?
I really like to make ginger snaps sometimes, though they don't always snap.
They don't
Kinda more
always snap?
Chewy. Guess that kind of defeats the point.
Yeah,
Oh well.
ginger snaps. Well, you know, cooking is trial and error. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And we're going to add the rest of the egg mixture. So that was 4 large eggs. So now we're going to add the flour, a little bit at a time here. And we're going to get that mixed. I should say that whenever I'm in Italy, I don't eat cookies for breakfast. But what I do eat is go to the bar. A bar is not what you think of as a bar. A bar is a place where you would get cappuccino, espresso, you know, acqua minerale, that kind of thing. And at the bar, you'll find things like different kinds of pastries, cornetti, which are like a, you know what a cornetto is? No. Cornetti are like, they're a very flaky pastry, almost like a croissant. So I think I can put the rest of that in. Okay, so we can get rid of that. And finish this, and then we should have a dough. So mix all this up. All right, I'm going to take half of this out and just leave it right there. Okay? So I'm going to leave this other half in. And I'm going to mix in this some dried cherries. And we can take that out, and we're going to put it right here. I'm going to do something with it. We'll scoop this back up, put it in here, and then we're going to add some nuts. How about some, these are slivered almonds.
Okay.
So Calliope, we're going to add some flavoring to this one, some brandy. So about a tablespoon of brandy. And we're going to add some cocoa, so we're going to make this a chocolate one. So in goes the cocoa. So now you mix this until it's all uniformly chocolate. And every once in a while you will have to stop the machine and scrape down that dough to make sure that it's all really well incorporated. So we took half of the chocolate dough out, and now we're going to add candied orange peel.
Ooh, yummy.
So this is homemade. This was made by Ruth Moore, who works on our show.
Ah.
But you could always use commercially prepared orange peel. I think that goes nice together with chocolate. So in goes the orange peel. Okay, so we're going to take this out now, Calliope, and put it on that sheet of parchment paper with that dough. So, well, that's that one. So you want to chop up the chocolate. It's got to be small enough, so because we have to put it in the dough, back in the dough. Good. Okay. And while you're doing that, I'm going to throw this back in here. And then we're going to use white chocolate as a glaze over the biscotti. You don't have to do this, but oftentimes you find them that way in Italy. Okay, that's small enough. You don't need it any smaller than that. Keep going. And once we have that, then we have our tanti biscotti that we're going to do. So let's work with this one first, because this has got more than the others, and we're going to make 2 logs out of this. So you take one of them. You want to sprinkle a little flour down on the board here? Okay, good. And then you roll them into a log using light pressure. Now you can make them as fat or as skinny as you want them, but I like them about this size. And you want to neaten up the edges and then you put them on a baking sheet like that.
Will they rise and like puff up?
They will, because we put baking powder
Oh.
in here, but you want to make sure that they're about the same size. So let's do, why don't you do this one?
Okay.
A little bit more flour. Okay. Nice dough, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very nice.
Make sure there's no cracks or holes anywhere. Yep.
Flatten it down.
Mm-hmm. Neaten up the edges. Yep. Make sure they're the same diameter here. Okay. Pick that up and put it over there. Spacing it.
It's a little longer.
That's okay. Everyone will know it's a homemade cookie, right? Okay. Now we have a little bit more flour on the board. We're going to work with our chocolate one. Put the flour down. And we do the same thing. See, this is a little bigger anyway because I have more, but that doesn't matter. We're making cookies. We're not scientists. And you pat it into that log. Now, while we're doing this, your oven, you have it preheated to 350. Leave that one there. And then you can do this one. A little bit more flour. Okay. So now what we have to do is bake these at 350 for about 20 or 25 minutes, just until these are kind of firm to the touch, but they're not done yet. Once we do that, I'll show you what to do next. Here they are, already cooled, Clyde. You see how firm they are? Mm-hmm. Do you see how firm they are? So now this is the part where the word biscotto comes from, which means twice cooked. So we baked these once, and now we have to bake them again. So what we want to do is cut down straight on the diagonal. Just do like that. You can make them as wide or as narrow as you want.
Whoa.
But this is the type of cookie that Italians would use for a cafe, or if they're going to have an espresso, or they're going to have wine, or they're going to dip biscotti in wine. So when you cut them on the diagonal, you want to lay them back on the bake sheet that they came off of, because now you're going to bake them again for about five more minutes or so, because you want them to get hard. You want them to be somewhat crispy. So you lay them on their side. And this is a great cookie to do ahead of time, because you can freeze this cookie. So you can put those on as well, because remember, we made 3 different kinds. Nope, on its side.
Oh.
So when they're in the oven for about 5 minutes or so, you want to go back and look and see, turn them. I usually turn them over to the other side, make sure that they're nicely browned everywhere. So that's going to take about 5 minutes, and then you want to let them cool, and then the next thing we have to do is make the glaze. So here we have some water in the bottom of a pan, and we just want to bring that to simmer, and then in a bowl, sitting in the pan, we have melted some white chocolate. Remember, it's not really chocolate, it's milk solids with sugar. But this is going to be the glaze for our cookies. So the chocolate is melted, and it will melt from the residual heat that's coming up from the bottom of the pan. So you want to turn it off. You don't want to burn this. Now we want to add a little bit of oil. So here's about a teaspoon of oil. You want to put that in for me? Just vegetable oil or sunflower oil. That just helps with the glaze, with the look of it, the shine of it. And when it's like that, it's really ready. So now you're ready to dip your cookies. You don't have to do this part. This is not required. But if you want to make it a little fancier, it's a good thing to know. All right, so now that we have that, all we have to do now is get those cookies and glaze them. So Calliope, here they are, twice baked now. See how hard they are? Mm-hmm. And they have a little brownness on them, see, on both sides. So now all you do is take them like that, see, and just let the excess drip off.
Oh, that's easy.
Isn't that pretty? And then they look like that. So let's do these. Let's do all the white ones first. So the next time you go to Italy, and you see biscotti, you can say, I know exactly how those are made, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and this is what that young guy who stayed with me wanted to eat for breakfast. Biscotti.
I wish I could have cookies for
I
breakfast.
know, don't we all? Okay. All right, that's great. And these need to dry, so they just leave them on I have them on a rack here with some wax paper underneath. And I think the glaze just makes them a little prettier, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you wanted to make them ahead of time, you could do this and freeze them without the glaze. Then you could just take them out, make the glaze, and you would have, saved yourself a little work. But these can be frozen. I like to make these at Christmas time. This is one of my go-to cookies at Christmas time. Okay, so there's a half dozen for you and a half dozen for me.
Yum, yum.
See these almonds?
Yeah.
See these almonds?
Yeah.
They're both the same thing. These are just whole almonds with their skins on, and these are blanched almonds with the skin off. Now, why am I telling you that? Because today we are going to make a cookie from northern Italy, from the Piedmont for sure, that's called amaretti di mombaruzzo. Say that. Amaretti di mombaruzzo. That's a really great saying. I love it. Amaretti di mombaruzzo.
I can't
because
pronounce
Mombaruzzo is a little town near Asti in northern Italy. And to be truthful with you, there are more producers making this cookie than there are people living in Mombaruzzo. So why is this cookie so important? Well, it has a little bit of a history, but let me tell you how you make it, and I'll tell you the story. So these are whole almonds, and for the amaretti, which means little bitter things, amaro means bitter, so amaretti, little bitter things. So these almonds that they use in Italy can be both sweet and bitter almonds, but in the United States, we do not have access to bitter almonds. So if you were making this in the Piedmont, you'd be using both sweet almonds and bitter almonds, and that's what gives this cookie its characteristic little bitter taste. However, we live here, right? So we've had to make some adjustment. So instead of I added just more whole almonds and eliminated the thought of even using bitter almonds. I mean, you can find them, but we are not using them because there is prussic acid in them, and the FDA does not sanction that. All right, so now that you know that, how do you make this cookie? Well, you start with these almonds, whole almonds. You want 1.5 cups of these almonds ground to a powder. You can do that in a food processor, or you can do it by hand. Food processors are much better because you want to have it more of a powder consistency. And then you want to add 2 cups of confectioner sugar. That's what we have in here. So I'm going to turn this on and let this go for a while, because we want to mix that together, really mix it well. Because then what we're going to have to do is take this out and combine it with some egg whites. So there's nothing really to this cookie except the confectioner sugar, the almonds, and the egg whites. But it's a very popular cookie. And it's often wrapped in pretty little papers, and it's put into cute little boxes, and then the Italians, you know how much flair they have. They give them to their friends and family. And if you can get me a spoon there so that I can get this out. Thank you. We're going to take this mixture now out of this pan, out of this bowl rather, and put it right here. Because now what we have to do is whip a couple of egg whites until they are at the soft peak stage. In a perfectly clean bowl, you want to add 2 large egg whites. And large is really relative when it comes to eggs. So now we want to whip these on high speed until they come to soft peaks. When we get to that part, we're going to fold them right into this almond and confectioner sugar mixture. All right. This is what I mean by soft peaks. Okay? Soft. Because if they're stiff, well, then you can't fold anything. So that goes right into the bowl with our almonds and our confectioner's sugar.
Looks like a bunch of clouds almost.
It does look like a bunch of clouds. So now what we have to do is just gently fold them in to the almond mixture. Okay?
Oh.
And these almonds actually are the flour for this cookie. So if you were a person who had a gluten problem, you could eat this cookie because there is no flour in this, and your almonds have become your flour.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. All right, so now that we have this, we're going to have to let this sit for a few minutes before we can now take this and form our cookies. You want to give it a turn?
Okay.
From the bottom over the top, gently. Underneath, until you don't see any more white, any
There's
more egg white. Over the top, fold over the top, like this. See?
Oh.
It took me a while to get it too when I was your age, but, okay. So you can see that the egg whites have created a batter, a dough, and there are several ways to do this. You can take this and put it on a board and roll it into a log and cut it into pieces, but I'm going to show you how to use a pastry bag with this.
Oh.
So we're going to take some of this mixture, and here I have a pastry bag without a tip. And to fill it, I usually put it in a glass because it's easier to load that way. Fold down the top and just load the bag. Once you have it like that, take the bag, twist it, give it a little bump to see that it's working, and then you make your cookies. Be my guest. Keep that twisted.
Okay.
And while she's doing that, I'm going to add some confectioner's sugar over the tops of these. These are going to go in the oven, 350. Try to make them about the same size. And you see now why you wanted to use blanched almonds, because this cookie needs to stay pale looking.
I don't think I can get any more batter out of this.
Okay, that's good. Okay. I think they get the idea. There they are. Oven's on, in they go. Gonna watch them about 10, 12 minutes. When they're done, they'll look like this. Okay. Want a bite?
All
They're
right.
crunchy on the outside, and they're soft on the inside, just the way they should be. So there you have it. Amaretti di mombaruzzo. Look what we made today. Tanti biscotti, right?
Yeah.
Tanti biscotti, because we started with a basic dough, and then we took that dough and we added cocoa to part of it. We added some dried fruits. We added nuts. We added orange peel. We added white chocolate. Biscotti. And we know that that is what Italians like for what?
Breakfast?
Breakfast. And then we traveled to the Piedmont and we made the amaretti di mombaruzzo. Remember, that's a cookie that's made with almonds and confectioner's sugar and egg whites. So, I know you have a sweet tooth. But anyway, thank you for being with me today in the kitchen, Calliope.
It was a
And until
pleasure.
I see you, Nella Cucina, again, I'm Mary Ann Esposito.
And I'm Calliope.
Ciao.